Hey students, welcome to week 13 of Business 222, Accounting Principles. This week we're going to look at kind of a different topic. Chapter 20 is divided into two sections. It's accounting, activity-based management type accounting for this week, and then we're going to look at lean-based or accounting for lean-based systems next week. Lean manufacturing, if you know anything about it, is pretty popular in American industry right now. Has been for quite some time. Came over from the Toyota production system in Japan. But there's kind of a special way to, a lot of companies are adopting a different way to look at lean, accounting systems for lean in their plant and their services. This week we're looking at the kind of the precursor to that. It's called activity-based accounting, or activity-based costing, excuse me. And so we're going to take a look at that. So this week, the objectives are, we're going to look at different value-based systems and what that means, discuss the relationship to supply chains and value chains and that sort of thing. And then we're going to dive into the basics of activity-based costing, ABC accounting, if you might hear it that way, and look at what that cost hierarchy might look like and the different levels of how things are accounted for in ABC type of accounting. Let's take a couple of notions here that are pretty important as we look at activity-based costing. One is called relevance, and this is kind of a strange definition. I'll give you a little background. So the predictive characteristics of the information that has a direct effect on a decision. So basically, listen, here's what it is. How important is this information to my decision? It's kind of what the other way of saying this is. What's the relevancy of the information I'm looking at? And is it important to the decision I have to make? Oftentimes we get stuff out of our accounting system that doesn't make sense. It's good stuff, it's good information, but does it make sense? Is it usable for what I have to make my decision on today? And sometimes the answer, frankly, is no, it's not. Set it aside. So there's this issue of relevancy. How important is the information to my decision? When we look at ABC type of accounting, and when we look at lean-based accounting activities, the relevancy goes up. All right. So let's talk about reliability for just a second. It basically comes down to, can I trust the information that I'm looking for? Relevancy and reliability, two concepts that are pretty important to understand as we take a deeper dive and start looking at activity-based costing. You may hear a lot, if you understand lean manufacturing or lean principles, if you've gotten into it, this idea of value-based systems provides customer-related activity-based information. The focus is on eliminating waste as companies produce their service and their goods. Kind of think about it like this. You're only going to deliver to the customer what's of value to the customer. The customer is only willing to pay for certain activities for you to do to deliver their product or their service. Managers can use value-based information reliably and relevant information to compare the value that's created by the products with the full product cost. So you kind of, whenever you look at the cost of a product, you want to know really how much of that is a value that actually went into that. Not everything we do when we produce a product or a service is of value. You might be surprised, it's a different course, but you might be surprised at how little value actually goes into something that you make for your customer, and that there's a lot of waste in that. So from a value chain perspective, each step in making a product or service is linked in the chain together. And again, is the customer willing to pay for that particular link in the chain is the overall question. And there's a sequence of activities that ties all these together from the raw supplier to the final customer. Always asking the question, is the customer really willing to pay for that particular link in the chain? This is an example, a real simple one. Research and development is done oftentimes in your company. It results in a design. It results in either being outsourced to a supplier, or maybe you make it yourself. It goes into production, it goes into a warehouse, or in this example, sales and marketing get involved to figure out how to sell the product that's in the warehouse. It goes to distribution to get it to a company, and then out to the final consumer or customers, it might be called in this example. So managers see their organizations and supply chains. When you think, put your supply chain hat on, managers see their organizations, both internal value, the internal value that they have inside their organization. They have their own little value chain. It's part of a much bigger supply chain from beginning to the consumer. And like it says, it's the path that leads for the suppliers from the raw material all the way to the final product to the customer. And I have an example of that I pulled from one of the courses I teach on supply chain management. So just for grins and giggles for a minute, imagine this is your company. Your company sources material to other suppliers, but then you get that material in, you produce it, you make it, you deliver it, you store it in a warehouse. It ends up getting transported to somebody else, to a customer who then, because you're a supplier to somebody else, so they source business to you, so you deliver it to them. They combine it with other suppliers. They make things, they make final assemblies, they make final goods, if you will, and then they turn around and they end up warehousing it and delivering it and transporting it to somebody else, to the final customer. Back here, though, back where you're at, you source a lot of your work outside. It's called outsourcing. And so those suppliers that you outsource to, they also source to somebody else often. And so they source it, they make it, they deliver it, they warehouse it, they transport it, logistics back to you. So that's kind of a look at the whole supply chain. And when you look at that, a lot of waste in there, and people doing things that the customer's not necessarily willing to pay for. So when we talk about value chains and supply chains, managers who understand how their company's value-added activities fit in suppliers have a much better handle on the real cost and the real waste. And so activity-based accounting, and then more specifically lean-based accounting, digs into assessing, measuring, and costing what the value is as well as what the waste is. And in doing that, there's this process called process value analysis, and it does exactly that. It identifies the non-value added activities and it identifies the value added activities. It actually puts cost to it. So value added activity is one that adds value to the service. It's something that the customer is willing to pay for. Non-value added activity, if the customer knew about them, they wouldn't be willing to pay for it. So I'll give you an example. At least in the automotive industries, automotive companies are very, very good at sniffing out the non-value added activity. In fact, what they do, if you sign a contract with them, with like say Ford for exhaust systems, like what we used to do, or suspension systems, or wheels, whatever it would be, they'll give you a 5-year contract perhaps on a new product, and they'll say, okay, year 1, we're going to pay you 100% of what you ask for once we negotiate that. But year 2, we're only going to pay you 98%. And in year 3, 95%. By the time you get down to year 5, you're down to like 90% or less of where you started, because they know that there's non-value added activity going on inside the process. So every year you have to cost reduce, take the waste out, and keep reducing your cost. Otherwise you lose money. Activity-based management identifies all the operating activities around the things that we're talking about, and you actually categorize. It's in your text, so make sure you check it out. But you categorize activities, and it focuses on reducing, eliminating non-value-added activities. Again, this is kind of the precursor to the lean discussion, which is going to come up next week. And activity-based costing has a number of tools to it. And those are in your text, so make sure you check those out. Okay, and there's a number of steps you go through to track activity-based costing. The one thing I do want you to know about this is not easy. ABC type of accounting is very involved, very complex, and it takes a lot of time. And some companies may not feel it's worth it. All right, I did attach a video though, and the extra materials to look at. It talks about comparing the traditional cost accounting to the activity-based costing system. Check it out. It's about, I think it's like 8 minutes, something like that, or 6 minutes, but it's really worth the watch. It kind of lines them up for you. All right, that's it. Make sure you're working on your assignments. Make sure you get them on time. You guys are doing great. Just a few more weeks to go.